name's Doug McBride. I'm the founder and mastering engineer, mix engineer for Gravity Studios. We've been going for 29 years as of this year, and we've got 2 recording studios in the building. This room we're in today is our mastering studio, which is a multi-purpose room. We have a vocal booth as well, but we do some mixing, and I do all of the mastering for Gravity, and I do it in here. I thought today I would describe just a little bit about the process and how I approach it and what mastering is. There's a lot of similarities in the way people approach mastering, but there's also considerable variance. And one thing that I think all top mastering engineers have in common is that they've spent the time and money to get a really good acoustical environment, a good room for their system. The way I've always looked at it, you always want the quality to go up. So you might have a terrific mix. You don't want to cut corners on mastering, basically. And the good news is that mastering is relatively quick. I can master an EP in one afternoon, or a song in an hour and a half, sometimes in an hour. So it's not as expensive or as time consuming as mixing, for instance, by a long shot. The thing about mastering is that it's a little more literal. There's more rules, I suppose, that apply to mastering than apply to mixing. You want someone who knows their gear inside and out and knows exactly where the sweet spots are. And when I talk about sweet spots, there's an operating range, and there's a range that the gear likes to see the audio hit. If the mix bounces off a compressor or an equalizer or even something passive like my dangerous console, everything has a sweet spot where it'll provide what some would describe as a transparent compression. Some would describe it as just a little bit of a glow or a bloom. I've heard terms like that used. As a result, when I take any mix from any engineer and put it through my console, it goes through a whole bunch of stuff that I've carefully dialed in. As soon as I hit play, it's going to sound better than it did before, just because it's going through tubes and transformers and discrete electronics. I find, and every mastering engineer may be just a little different on this, but I find that certain types of technologies, certain types of transformers, certain types of tubes, all these sorts of things affect literally all genres in a positive way. But that's assuming that they're hit in that small range. Sometimes that range that I talked about is 6 dB or 8 dB. Sometimes it's even smaller than that. But if you hit each of those pieces of gear at just the right spot, what comes out is more vibrant and clear right off the bat. So basically, I'll have my source session where I'm playing back the mix. I'm running it then through a really high quality D to A converter, digital to analog converter, in order to run it into the analog realm, which enables me to run it through all my analog gear here in the console, which I'll show you in a minute. And then I capture it in a second session, which I call my sequence session or catch session. At that point, I can worry about making it loud enough and stuff like that at that point, as well as making real subtle changes in order to make the album kind of blend together beautifully, so that for instance, the vocal is at the same apparent level throughout the album. Stuff like that's really important. But I guess at this point I can show you my mastering console. So basically, what I've got going here is the mastering console per se is this collection of these 3 units here made by Dangerous. And basically the sound comes in at my input potentiometers. Then I've got 3 inserts that have various combinations of analog gear on each insert. So I can, for instance, I'm using my P331 here. If I just hit 1, that mutes it out in an actually quite transparent way. It doesn't make any popping sound or anything. So then I pop it back in, and I'm hearing the result of this piece of audio gear. On number 2, I think I have a couple pieces. I think maybe the Bax equalizer down here at the bottom, as well as my NIF Soma equalizer. I believe those are both on insert 2. And then on insert 3, it's my de-esser and my Verimu. So basically, the sound's going to go through each of those units, and I can dial in the volume before it hits each of those boxes to make sure it's exactly where I want it in order to get the best sound out of each of those boxes. So Once it runs through each of these units, then it'll be sent into my Crane Song Quantum. It's got some subtle DSP available, which I'll use sometimes very subtly, but it can be nice. But it's just a super high quality converter. And then into my source sessions. The first thing you might notice is that I'm not using Logic or Pro Tools. What I use is a German software called Samplitude, which is actually quite common. As you can see here, I've got an album by Push Puppets. So these are the mixes. As they come in, you can see there's various volumes. So like, for instance, this song here is cooking pretty well, whereas this song here is I don't know if I'd say it's quite quiet, but it's probably about 6 dB quieter than the next song. And that's not uncommon at all, to have songs that come in at various volumes. But what I'll do is I'll listen down to all these songs one by one and take notes before I start twisting any knobs. And I'm listening for things like, where does it get muddy? Where does it seem weak, or where could I add just a touch of impact to any part of it? Another thing to consider is it clear enough? Can I hear all the instruments clearly? Can I hear the words clearly? And hearing the words clearly is, I think, a quite important thing, and a good mastering engineer can bring a lot to that issue, because there's a lot of tools and techniques that make it possible to kind of isolate the lead vocal and make it clearer, which is very important. So basically, I'll listen to all these songs and take notes. Which songs does the vocal sound a little quiet? Which songs does the vocal sound a little S-y? Sometimes I'll get a nice loud vocal, but it'll be really zippy on the S's. And in a situation like that, I've got this delightful Maselect de-esser here at the top that was modded at Sterling by Chris Muth, and it's just fabulous. It's modded after with actual parts from an old Neumann lathe de-esser. So I've got these songs. I'll adjust their volumes, and I'll go on a song-per-song basis and adjust the equalization and adjust the compression and adjust my tube loading amplifier here, which is a delightful addition to the console, and then record it into the second session. Off to the right here, you can see there's another audio session that's kind of hiding. So what you see here is one of the songs that after it's gone through the analog console. So it's a little bit louder, not super loud, but a little bit louder, having touched all that stuff. When it comes to volume, I'm a little bit old school in that if I can hear anything that resembles distortion or clipping or overloading in any way, I'll back it off until I no longer hear that artifact. I like stuff to sound open, and I don't think the technology should get in the way. But basically, yeah, once I get the song captured, recorded through my console, then I'll have this representation here, and I'll make last minute adjustments. At that point, I'll use plugins. So I've got a wide collection of plugins that are useful, which I use subtly because, as is the case with everything in mastering, it's a game of inches. You're always working with subtleties. So something that occurred to me to point out, back in 1995, I had the privilege of attending a session with a mastering engineer named Bob Ludwig, and he was mastering an album that I'd produced and mixed. The label flew me out to Portland, and it was a fabulously interesting experience for a number of reasons, but one of them was because his monitoring was so good, I would hear what he was doing, and I'd say, "Did you just add a little 400 there?" Yeah, good ear, and then I'd say, "How much did you add?" And he'd say, "Well, I turned it up to 2 dB in order to kind of hear what it was going on, and then I backed it off, and so at this point it's only half dB." And I realized, okay, so a lot of these moves he's making are a quarter dB, half dB. So that's actually very subtle to many people's ears, but it's still kind of the way mastering is done. So at that point, I thought mastering is about 20 little decisions, quarter dB here, quarter dB there, compressing stuff just so maybe the needle wiggles just a little. And between these 20 decisions, if those are all decisions that are made correctly, then you'll have a successful master, and a successful master can make a song sound, 15 to 25% better, maybe, something like that. It depends on who's listening. when I tell this story, I always point out that this realization was from years ago. So as I got into mastering myself, I realized, oh, wait, now there's this issue, and I never really thought about that. And as is the case with just about anything, when you spend years compulsively learning it, you come up with a lot of other things that you hadn't realized. So as a result, now, to me, it's 50 things, maybe, instead of 20, 50 little decisions that are made on each song. And if those decisions if 50 of the 60 are made correctly, then it's going to sound pretty darn good. And if I'm lucky enough to get all 60 right, then it'll probably be kind of transformative and potentially. And that's important to point out that I'm fortunate to work on a wide variety of music. So some stuff, there's just no transformation is necessary. It's important to point out that some of my favorite mixing engineers that send me work, that I do very little. There might be 50 decisions still, but maybe the decision is to do nothing. So those sometimes are the most fun because they come in sounding 99% there, and I get to bring it that extra one. And in some cases, these extremely talented mixing engineers are just trusting me for what not to do as much as they're trusting me for what I could do. So that is my quick little overview about mastering within the context of my studio, Gravity Studios in Chicago. My name is Doug McBride, and thanks for listening.